Fallout has played host to a variety of interesting and unexplainable events, species, and people. From the extravagant to the estranged, we have seen Fallout's world evolve over the past several decades, which has produced baffling and enigmatic entities, such as one would describe when looking at the mythical Smiling Man. In our recent video, we took a deep dive into Fallout's cryptids, and yet we intentionally left one individual or entity out of it. All through October, we're covering the more unexplainable and cryptic side of Fallout. So if you're interested in researching the unusual and mysterious side of Fallout lore with us, consider subbing. It would mean a lot to us, and we promise to continue to pour our hearts and souls into worthy content for this amazing community. Also, if you enjoy the vid, give it a like. We could use the algorithm's favorability. Let's dive into the elusive Smiling Man. The Smiling Man, also known as Indrid Cold, and not to be mistaken with this guy, is a mysterious, albeit eloquent individual randomly encountered in Appalachia in Fallout 76, and was first introduced in the Mutation Invasion update. Who is the Smiling Man? Why is he the way he is? The Smiling Man introduces himself as Indrid and states, "I am cold," when his coat is commented upon. He never says that his full name is Indrid Cold, though his delivery and the capitalization of Cold imply it is his surname. The Smiling Man's face rests in an exaggerated, haunting grin, which appears to be wider than should be possible. Unlike most Wasteland Wanderers, he wears an antiquated dark gray suit in a highly formal fashion, which only adds to his mystery. He carries himself as if he comes from a different time, perhaps pre-Great War, if not farther back than potentially any other human or ghoul on the planet. And his comments suggest he is returning to Appalachia, possibly from before the Great War, as he says much has changed during his absence and that he has been away a long time, with venturing sights that need to be seen. When you are greeted by him, he asks you not to be afraid and counters that he hopes he has found you well.
I do hope I have found you well.
Verbiage such as this, along with his attire, implies he comes from a pre-industrial revolution era, but perhaps he is not even from this plane of existence. He claims he is either, quote, seeking a seeker who cannot be found, but also suggests that perhaps he is the one who is lost in a teasing approach. Ironically, he also banters that he's delighted to see another smiling face. But what's interesting is that he asks about local peculiarities, and in Fallout 76, we see that peculiarities are in the droves, ranging from obscure Mothmen to horrendous sheepsquatch and menacing snallygasters, all of which are dialogue options that the Smiling Man is interested in, and all of which are cryptids. If we put on our detective hats and look close enough, there's also a dialogue option to confront him about him being a local peculiarity. Could this imply that he too is a cryptid? Let's snag on this thread for a second. Perhaps one of the most foreshadowing updates in Fallout 76, or the Fallout universe for that matter, was the Rip Daring and the Cryptid Hunt. Despite this being a Season 12 controversy, with players divided in their opinions on whether science fiction and American folklore should have been expressed so fluently in the game, this release gave the player base a lot to chew on and speculate with. When the Rip Daring board was released, players immediately speculated whether or not cryptids such as the Mothmen or the Flatwoods monsters would be expanded upon, and although they were, there were plenty of other cryptids that were less explored. And no, I'm not necessarily talking about the Squonk, although that was relatively unexplored as well. If we navigate toward the top middle portion of the board, there's a slender gentleman wearing a spiffy suit, smiling suspiciously. Noting that other board illustrations are indeed cryptids, it could be inferred that the Smiling Man is also a cryptid. It's also interesting to note that if you choose to be confrontational and shoot at the Smiling Man, assuming you're fortunate to cross paths with him in the Appalachia, he remains relatively unfazed, but will fly off in a Harry Potter Dementor fashion. Or rather, in a fashion one would find if they were to spook a Mothman in the woods, with whimsical black illustrations following behind him as he takes off into the horizon. This act alone is reminiscent of our other beloved Mothman cryptids. He also has some type of connection with the Blue Devil, as he can be heard questioning, "Ever dance with the devil under a blue moon?" Foreshadowing the Blue Devil, a cryptid added to the Once in a Blue Moon update. This is also a reference to a similar line from the 1989 film Batman, said by the Joker.
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?
He also mentions, "I see the moon and the moon sees me," implying there is a connection to nighttime and moonlight in general. What do we make of this guy? If you ask him what he wants from you, he will answer,
Not from you, for you. I want only happiness for you.
This is highly unusual for any wandering fellow to say, let alone a potential cryptid. At some point, however, Indrid came across Stephen Scarberry, who felt the smiling man had a cold personality. Stephen, a pilgrim of the cult of the Mothman, later speculated that they may be looking for similar things. Again, there appears to be a parallel with the smiling man and the Mothman to a degree here. Also, interestingly enough, both characters share the same voice actor, Robbie Daymond. And although they may have similar motives or wants, not all Wastelanders have taken a liking to Indrid, as Clyde, who is also an interesting individual with almost nothing to say ever, mentioned in a terminal that, quote, "Some freak came into the bar last night. Didn't even see him come through the door, just looked up from cleaning the counter and there he was, grinning from ear to ear, wider than should be possible. He didn't greet me. In fact, he said nothing at all the whole time he was here. He put exactly 10 caps on the counter, one at a time. Well, that's how much a drink costs, so I handed him a beer. He took the bottle and sat by the fire for hours. Didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even drink the beer, the ungrateful bastard. Only sound I heard him make was a faint chuckle under his breath. Freaked me the fuck out. Gonna keep my shotgun real close from now on." The other piece of information we have stems from the White Spring Resort terminal, stating that patient ID number 547-3162 was admitted to clinic unconscious and with no visible external trauma, signs of internal injury, or evidence of illness beyond their unconscious state. Patient was brought in by an individual who only gave their name as Bob and who departed suddenly before more information could be taken. Patient was breathing steadily and heart rate was normal. Fluids were administered along with vitamin injections. Resources for feeding a comatose patient were unavailable and attempts to manually feed him were unsuccessful. But the patient showed no signs of starvation despite this lack of nutrition. During 2 weeks of observation, no change in the patient's state was noticed. Clinic staff reported feeling oddly cold when near the patient, and several accused the patient of somehow being responsible for the sudden failure of a number of pieces of electrical equipment in the vicinity. 2 weeks after admission, the patient's bed was found empty during the night shift's attendant's rounds. A search of the refuge and its grounds found no sign of the patient, nor could any witness to their departure be located. The administrator note stated, "Can we please keep the ghoul stories out of our medical records? We're in a big drafty building with a bunch of salvaged equipment and people come and go all the time without any of us noticing. We're supposed to be doctors, damn it." This only adds to the mystery of the smiling man, as there is clearly another associate that he has relations with to a degree, but is also relatively unknown. We have to ask ourselves, where does the smiling man folklore come from? The smiling man is an Appalachian urban legend associated with the Mothman. Cold himself is sometimes described as a cryptid. In November 1966, a West Virginian resident named Woodrow Derenberger reported seeing a light on the road ahead of him. Supposedly, when he approached it, Woodrow met a man whose unnerving smile did not ever fade. The man spoke telepathically to Woodrow and asked for his name. The man introduced himself as Cold and assured Woodrow that he meant no harm and wished him only happiness. This is why the smiling man in Fallout 76 says, "I want only happiness for you." He was described as standing with his arms crossed over his chest and his hands tucked under his armpits, as if to keep them warm, gesturing with his elbows, though these mannerisms are not reflected in the animations or text of the game. That same month, the Mothman was first spotted in Point Pleasant. UFOologist John A. Keel first connected the two in his 1970 book, Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which was later used as a basis for his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. 14 researchers and UFOologists generally hold Indrid Cold to be a non-human entity. In the film adaptation of The Mothman Prophecies, Indrid is depicted only in silhouette. He is briefly seen with the wings of a moth. As discussed in the book, Derenberger later reported being visited by men in black, which are similarly understood in UFO lore to be deeply uncanny pseudo-humans. The emissary appears to be based on the legend of the men in black. However, skeptics claim that the encounters were embellished significantly by John Keel and Gray Barker compared to the initial details of Derenberger's reports. One of the smiling man's idle lines is, "Yesterday upon the stair, I met a man who wasn't there." He wasn't there again today. Oh, how I wish he'd go away. This is a direct quote from the 1899 poem Antigonish by William Hughes Mearns. The poem is about a ghost in a haunted house. Another one of the smiling man's idle lines is, "Ah, but this is a wondrous strange." This is a quote from William Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 5, in which the main character says, "Oh, day and night, but this is a wondrous strange." Also, one of the smiling man's greetings is,
I've heard the moon can be blue, and I trust that to be true.
Baloo is an unusual term. It is actually an Old English spelling for blue, and is associated in astronomy with blue moons. The first written usage of the term blue moon in English contains this Baloo spelling. It's also kind of fun to theorize that perhaps the smiling man has relations to Fred from Courage the Cowardly Dog, as I've noticed that they both continually tend to rhyme when they talk.
Barbara, my love was named, and her fair hair, a mane untamed.
I have such sights to see. Perhaps you can recommend a local peculiarity.
Though the smiling man doesn't do it quite as frequently. Interestingly enough, the smiling man's appearance changed slightly from the public test server to the live release of Mutation Invasion. In testing, he had warm black hair and blue hazy eyes. This was changed to dark brown hair and blue pale eyes for the live release. Several details in Fallout 76 allude to the works of the McElroy brothers, who are podcasters and comedians and prominent West Virginians. Season 2 of their podcast, The Adventure Zone, titled Amnesty, takes place in West Virginia, and Indrid Cold is a central character as noted on the Mythical Figures brief wiki page. The depictions could be called similar in their affectations and manner of speaking. In the lore of the Adventure Zone Amnesty, Indrid Cold is the human guise of the Mothman. Though we have yet to discover the entity's origin or explanation, we do know that he borders a thin line between human, cryptid, and immortal entity. As much as we'd like to know more about the Smiling Man and his origins and intentions, there's something special about the mystery that shrouds his background and his motives. We look forward to seeing if any more tidbits of info come out in relation to this character, yet my personal hope is that he remains an enigma. Remember that man can learn nothing except by going from the known to the unknown. But I want to know your personal thoughts. Do you think the Smiling Man's lore should be expanded upon? Comment below and give us your insights. Thank you guys for watching. We're excited to share more creepy Fallout lore in the coming weeks, and future Fallout lore in general. Remember, enjoy time is never wasted time, and we'll see you in the next.